You are listening to the continuation of the story. You can listen to the previous part via the link in the description below this video. Happy listening. After that, I just saved the file to the cloud. I hatched a plan to make them all suffer. I just needed to provide myself with an alibi for when chaos broke out. One of the central questions that needed to be answered was whether I wanted to be there when all hell broke loose, or whether I needed a plausible excuse. The cruel plan I hatched could have resulted in years of imprisonment for me, so perhaps I needed more help, and this is the most alibi that cannot be disproved. When I finished listening to the recordings, it was not too late, but I felt like a lemon. My future and the future of my marriage were now in great question. I had no intention of hurting myself or seeking solace in a bottle, but I knew that my ability to trust and build new relationships with women was now in serious doubt. I knew that many in my place would want to see if Marie could again become the woman I fell in love with, but it seemed to me that that train had already left. She was obviously fascinated by Mark, Susie, and the lifestyle they represented. Perhaps in her 40s, she felt that life was too short not to try alternative options. All I knew for sure was that this lifestyle was not mine, and I did not have to approve of it. I also wondered if I could live in the same city as Marie after we broke up. Our extended families still lived here, but I knew a lot of people who were following their dreams and moving. I could do the same. I would miss friends and family gatherings, but planes fly into our regional airport several times a day. If I moved and there was a transportation hub nearby, I could fly home as often as I wanted or needed. A couple of days ago, I met with a recruiter. He said a production company from Atlanta wanted to talk to me. My age combined with experience was exactly what they needed. This company was opening a new plant in Mexico and wanted to start things off on the right note. It was no secret that we had great success in recruiting and changing the lives of ex-prisoners and ex-addicts. Although the plant was not located in a cartel-held zone, the labor force in that area of Mexico left much to be desired. The recruiter claimed that it was a religious company that sought to influence poor and underserved areas to lift people out of poverty while producing cheap but high-quality products. It was interesting, but I didn't want to move Marie and Stacy at the time. Now everything was different. I would have had to leave Stacy because I couldn't imagine her wanting to move to another country to finish school. All her childhood friends were going to graduate together in a year. In addition, I doubted that the court would grant me custody since Marie was still a wonderful mother, although she was no longer a good wife. The evening wasn't too late yet, so I sent a message to the recruiter. He will contact me in the morning. I might be gone this weekend when Mark wants to involve me in his evil plans. If not, I'll come up with some other reason to be away this weekend. When I looked at my watch, it was already around midnight. Time to think about sleep. The evening was cool, and I opened most of the windows to let in a fresh breeze and cool the room. I sleep better when the environment is cool, but the bed is warm. Marie may be a traitor, but she is still a warm body, and I knew there were many cold and lonely nights ahead of me. I wanted to spend a few more nights in the same bed with her, but I didn't want sex anymore. Note to self, get tested for STDs as soon as possible. Marie was fast asleep when I entered the bedroom. Yes, she locked the door, but it was easy to open, and she knew it. It was more of a symbolic gesture to lock me out of the bedroom than a real attempt to keep me out. Since she was sleeping very soundly, I took out a small flashlight that I keep next to the bed and slowly pulled back the blanket to look at her. She was wearing her usual t-shirt and panties. I carefully lifted my t-shirt and noticed a bruise on my ribs. I took a photo of this on my phone. Then I carefully turned her a little and saw marks on her chest and neck. Since I had finally decided to end this farce, I slept well. If I had any doubts, I would toss and turn all night. I woke up early, got up without waking Marie, and quickly got ready to leave. But he couldn't sneak away as he had planned. I had just finished getting dressed when Marie woke up and slowly got out of bed, moaning as if she was in pain. I didn't comment or ask any questions while she struggled to the bathroom, as if on her walk of shame. While she was doing her business in the bathroom, I finished getting dressed, went downstairs, made myself some coffee, and left without saying a word to Marie. At work, I met up with Max and Brock again before Brock left for the day. I laid out my thoughts on revenge, and we discussed ideas a bit. I wanted them not to get too carried away with this, as my plan could easily go wrong and prison was a very real outcome. They both laughed at me and told me to just name a day when I wanted to set things in motion and let it happen. If all goes well, there will be no hard evidence pointing to us, and the three conspirators will be in a very awkward position. Brock knew a couple of people who could carry out an unpleasant and dirty intervention without causing any serious harm, but leaving constant reminders of it for everyone involved. After they left the office, I made an appointment with my accountant and then with a divorce lawyer. I had a large pension fund, and I knew Marie would get at least half. The equity in the house was large enough to partially offset the retirement fund, as I planned to leave the house to Marie so that Stacy could live in familiar surroundings for a few more years. Jamie and Mick could also stay there when they come to visit. My accountant told me that the courts have a very negative view of attempts to hide assets, even if there are good reasons for doing so. We discussed credit cards, loans, and how to resolve them. We had quite a bit of money in savings accounts, money markets, and even mutual funds. We decided that I could easily pay off the credit cards and then reissue them in Marie's name. I already had one card in my name, so I didn't need a second one yet. I asked about issuing a statement that I was no longer responsible for debts other than my own, but he just laughed and said it was better not to waste money on that. He called the bank on my behalf and soon opened a new checking account, where he transferred the bulk of my funds. I had to transfer money into a joint account to cover household expenses, but Marie would not be able to go on a shopping spree. He also transferred half of his savings to the new account. I had to go into the bank and take out everything that I wanted to keep from the general safe deposit box. I received a call about a job in Atlanta and set up a preliminary interview for the next day. The lawyer tried to convince me to consider reconciliation as a way to reduce the stress and financial loss associated with divorce. But after I outlined the facts of her betrayal and he listened to the recording, he agreed to prepare the documents and hand them over as soon as I gave the command. I told him that I was planning to look for a job in another city, so it might be a few weeks before I announced my plans to Marie. It's been a long day. I actually stayed late at work this evening to catch up on time spent with the accountant and lawyer. When Brock came into the office, we all met for a couple of minutes. Brock just sat there, gave me the thumbs up, and smiled. He didn't go into detail, but handed over a note. "We won't risk being overheard. Read this and return it to me. I found the right person who can do everything I need. He will let us know how he wants to be paid." I nodded and returned the note. He quickly tore it and even ate pieces. We discussed some work issues before they left. Max was going to check a few more parts that we needed, and Brock was going to have his team complete it. I texted Marie that I was swamped with work and planned to be back late. Surprisingly, there was no answer for more than an hour. I chuckled. She became careless and met with Mark more and more often. I ordered myself a sandwich and chips for dinner and continued working. I returned home around 10 in the evening, and Marie was already asleep. It seems I didn't have to pretend that I was still the unsuspecting husband, at least that evening. I managed to sleep well again. The next morning went as usual, even though I got up a little earlier than usual. Marie no longer woke up slowly and painfully like the day before, but she still winced a little as she got out of bed and headed to the bathroom. I ignored her pained expression. I think her bruised ribs were still very tender. At 9 in the morning, I met with a recruiter. He explained what the new company expected. It would be a challenge, but I thought I could cope if I took a couple of good leaders with me. I immediately thought of Max and Brock. The company wanted to meet with me in person as soon as possible, so I arranged to fly to Atlanta on Thursday. We were supposed to meet on Friday at the company headquarters. Then I called Max. "I'll be leaving on Thursday and Friday for a meeting. I know it's quick, but how far along are we with the plans?" "Well, boss, there won't be much time by Thursday, but in a week, I think everything will be ready." I nodded. By the way, I don't know how this will all unfold, but perhaps there will be an opportunity to work for better wages at the new plant in Mexico. Would you consider being a part of this? Well, there's nothing really holding me back here, but I'll need to talk to my probation officer. Think about it. I'll give you more details as soon as I know them. Do you think Brock would be willing to move? He nodded. There's nothing really keeping him here either. That evening, I returned home at my usual time, and lo and behold, Marie was at home and cooking dinner. I told her that I was flying east, but did not explain the reason. He just said it was a business meeting. But I invited Mark and Susie to Friday night. When will you be back? If everything goes well, I should be back sometime on Friday evening, but I don't know for sure yet. If everything goes well, I'll be back early in the evening. If things go wrong, you may have to stay overnight on Friday. I won't say for sure yet. But they want to see you. They love you. I had to bite my lip to keep a sarcastic retort from slipping out. I tried to remain calm and finally shrugged, as if to make it clear that I had no choice. We'll have to reschedule the meeting for another weekend. She looked at me in surprise. What do you mean by other weekends? Oh, it was almost like letting the cat out of the bag. I tried to divert her suspicions. I don't think I told you, but I was wondering if Mark was into golf. I had an idea to spend the weekend at a nice resort near a golf course. We could all go together, relax in the sun, by the pool, or on the beach, drink a bunch of mimosas, play a little golf, and just relax. You haven't played golf for a couple of years. Why now? You want me to get to know Billings better. Why not spend the weekend together relaxing and getting closer to each other? I think she wasn't particularly convinced by this answer, but she thought about it. Why don't you come back on Friday evening, and then we can meet and discuss this idea? I'm sure they will be happy to come with us, especially if we pay for the trip, because Mark doesn't earn much as a teacher. I just smiled and nodded. She ran off to call him. I breathed a sigh of relief. I was able to successfully delay their plans. I still did not understand their delusion that I would ever agree to their tricks. I could understand that Marie was desperate for me to join, but Mark and Susie seemed too cynical to be that naive. I wondered if illegal substances and blackmail were their main tools. However, it didn't matter whether I agreed voluntarily or whether they forced me. The main thing was that they got control. I don't know if Marie wanted anything intimate that night, since I went to bed early and, yes, was really deep asleep before she even went to bed. I got up early and finished my morning routine before she woke up. Brock, Max, and I met in one of the warehouses next to the production floor for a short meeting. We decided that this was a good place to talk since it was very noisy and Brock wouldn't have to eat his notes. We agreed early on that we would not use text messages, email, or any other form of communication that might leave a mark if my plan failed. I told them to purchase 3 blank phones so they could be contacted in case of an emergency. This was the next step in our planning. Max found the right person for the necessary medications. Brock has found someone to help him. This guy, Julio, was angry at women in general because his wife kicked him out of the house and took the kids with her to Mexico to live with her lover. He was still legally married. He had a few additional ideas on how to impress our trio of traitors so that they would seriously learn their lesson about betrayal. We decided to put everything on hold until I returned from Atlanta. We also discussed the possibility of moving to Mexico. Max and Brock were ready to go if I decided to go. Brock was already out of probation, but Max needed to check with his officer. If he can't leave with us, then in just a few months he'll be free to join. It was just another normal evening at home. This time I cooked. Made a simple meatloaf with mashed potatoes and peas. In my opinion, it turned out well. Stacy thanked me and washed the dishes. Marie just kissed me on the cheek. I was surprised that she wasn't late at work even once during the week. I wasn't going to ask, and I'm sure she wouldn't admit it. Another night without sex. I didn't know if Marie was waiting for me to make the first move and seduce her, or if she just didn't want to make love to me. I definitely didn't want to risk my health and come into contact with something from where I could catch the disease. I again mentally vowed to get tested. The next night, I returned home late again, stopped by the free clinic for tests, but called Marie and Stacy in advance to warn. I had a quick snack and started packing for the morning flight. Marie made small comments about how she needed something to tide her over until I returned, but I declined, citing fatigue and needing to sleep. She tried to make out in bed to seduce me, but I refused, promising a wild night of love when I returned. I didn't understand why she was so insistent because I was sure that on Thursday evening she would spend time with her lovers. She was clearly getting a lot more sex than me, and it seemed like it had been that way for months. The flight was routine. The hotel was average, as was the dinner that evening. The interview was successful. By the time we finished, a preliminary agreement had been reached. Since I was planning to move to Mexico, we agreed that I would be paid through a local bank to keep my income in Mexico. It will be very difficult for Marie to access my future earnings. Bonuses will be paid in part through stock options and deferred for a period well beyond the date of any divorce decree. Max and Brock will also receive bonuses that they don't currently have. The new company was well aware of the work required to get the plant up and running and profitable, and wanted it to happen as quickly as possible. We shook hands, sealing the deal. My lawyer should have reviewed the contract before signing, but I believe the arrangement was mutually beneficial. We also agreed to start work in a couple of weeks. My old company probably wouldn't be happy, but I hoped that by explaining that I needed to move urgently due to marital problems, my bosses would at least understand. I arranged to take an overnight flight home, only to return in the middle of the night. I wondered if I'd catch Marie with the Billingses, but I didn't really care anymore. It wouldn't change my plans in any way. It would just add even more guilt on their part when the time of reckoning comes. I called Marie from the Atlanta airport before boarding. She said she was at home and waiting for me. I didn't hear heavy breathing or any extraneous sounds, so maybe she wasn't lying this time. Stacy was staying over at a friend's house to celebrate her birthday, so I couldn't check with her, and I didn't really want to. Stacy might become suspicious and start asking her mother uncomfortable questions. The flight arrived on time, and I picked up my car from long-term parking and then headed home. I arrived around 1:30 in the morning. The outside light was on even though I drove into the garage. I was surprised that Mark's car wasn't there. To be honest, I expected the collision to happen that night. Mark seemed very determined to get me to agree this weekend. Suddenly, the thought of Saturday night came to my mind. What if they just moved their plans up one day? Will they be able to spend their time as they want if they have Saturday and Sunday? Will I wake up in the morning tied to my bed? I was not armed. Until this moment, I had not thought about protection, but now these thoughts came. It wouldn't matter if Marie helped them when I'm most vulnerable in my sleep. How can I protect myself from their attack? Or how to prevent them from succeeding? Finally, I decided to write to Max and Brock and ask them to call me in the morning. So the rule about voice communication only directly collapses. If I don't answer, they should call the police and report my abduction. Due to the lateness of the hour, I didn't expect a response from Max until the morning, but Brock responded and said he would arrange for Max to contact me periodically throughout the weekend. Having calmed down, I entered the house. It was quiet inside. Marie's car was in its usual place in the garage, and I expected her to be sleeping in our bedroom. To my surprise, she was asleep in a chair in the living room. Apparently, she was waiting for me. Previously, before I found out about her infidelities with Mark and Susie, I would have been pleased with such a show of concern. Now I only doubted her sincerity. I leaned over and gently shook her shoulder. She yawned and stretched. "Oh, honey, I tried to wait for you, but I think I dozed off." "How was the trip? Did everything work out?" "Yes, Marie, everything worked out. I'm going to move forward with a new project. The flight was normal. Let's go to bed and have a good night's sleep. I wanted to seduce you tonight. It's been so long since I've been close to you. I feel left out. I appreciate your concern, but we both need a good night's sleep. I can imagine how your muscles ache after sleeping in a chair. Come on, the bed is calling us." I had absolutely no intention of sleeping with her again. God only knows what could be lurking in her system. and I wasn't going to risk catching something from her. I still helped her get up, and she stood up with a slight groan, still feeling discomfort after sleeping in an uncomfortable position. In the bedroom, I quickly undressed, put on my shorts, and climbed into bed. Marie simply took off her robe. She was completely naked underneath and didn't put anything on, just climbed onto her side of the bed. I was ready to turn my back to her and fall asleep, but she had other plans. When I didn't try to kiss her goodnight, she leaned in for a kiss. "Troy, don't you want me anymore? What happened, honey? Why don't you get excited and crave me? Do you have someone?" Her words were spoken quietly, but she was completely serious. I quickly thought about her questions and tried to formulate a tactful answer without giving away my true intentions. I really wanted to ask her why she was so insistent on having sex with me when I felt like she was already getting everything she needed from Mark and Susie. "Marie, I'm really just tired. There are a lot of conflicts and worries at work that take up all my attention, and I haven't thought about sex for many days. I've never had anyone else. I have never cheated on you and have not even been tempted to do so since we started dating many years ago. I was proud that you got pregnant, although it happened a little earlier than I expected. I love our children. I wouldn't trade them for anything. I can't imagine anything more satisfying than growing old with you, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and perhaps great-grandchildren." I fell silent and looked at her. "Can you say the same?" I didn't wait for her answer. I just moved slightly, she rolled off me onto her side, and I got up and went to the bathroom. I was sick of the dinner I ate in Atlanta before my flight home that evening. I forced myself to pee a little, even though I didn't really feel the need, but I wanted Marie to think that I really needed to go to the toilet. I washed my hands, then my face. Looking in the mirror, I was shocked. My face looked haggard and drawn. God, I looked and felt terrible. Something had to change, and very soon, otherwise I risked ending up in the hospital from overwork. I washed my face with cold water and returned to the bedroom. Marie had already moved to her side of the bed, but was watching me carefully. I made a decision. Since I'm likely to have trouble sleeping, I think I should lie down in Mick's room so as not to disturb you. I turned around and left the room. I wonder if she realized that I didn't even expect her to respond to my comment and my intention not to sleep in the same bed with her. By the way, Mick's room had a locked door. When he became a teenager, he asked for a lock to prevent his sisters from breaking in on him while he might have been pleasuring himself. Marie and I had a hard time holding back our laughter, but we agreed and put a lock on his door. Of course, his sisters also wanted locks, but we turned them down because Mick never entered their rooms unannounced. I locked the door behind me and tried to sleep. It didn't come to me right away. On some level, I still loved Marie, but I couldn't justify her recent actions. I didn't care what excuses she used to explain her behavior. She deliberately destroyed our marriage and hurt me without a hint of remorse. It will also hurt our children and possibly deprive them of a loving mother. I didn't want them to take sides, but I hoped that we raised them with a higher moral compass than the one she was displaying now. She and her two lovers had to pay a heavy price for what they did. If my plan succeeds, they will pay exactly the price I intended. Max called me early Saturday morning to see how I was doing. I told him that there were no attempts to attack me, but I still did not feel safe. He said he and Brock would take turns calling me every few hours. They have already agreed that they will refer to some unscheduled situation at work, where my participation is extremely necessary, but my physical presence is not. I was fine with that. I spent the day mowing the lawn and maintaining the grounds. This was one of the disadvantages of owning such a large house with a huge ground. I took a lunch break and had a beer while Marie had a couple glasses of wine with lunch. And just when I was ready to go back outside, she threw me her little bomb. I called Mark and Susie. They want to go somewhere in the evening and just spend time together. Do you mind? Sounds like a plan, but it's worth considering the problem at the plant. Will they be upset if I keep answering calls from work? I'm not the best actor. I only had to keep up the facade for a short time, but I wasn't sure I could pretend for long in front of Marie and her two lovers. I bit my lip, thinking before making a decision. To hell with it, let's try it. Where do they want to go? They were thinking of having dinner at the new burger bar and then playing mini golf. I told them about your idea for a weekend at a resort, and they are delighted. Turns out even Susie plays golf, so we could all go to the course. In the meantime, let's practice mini golf. Maybe I can pull this off. Sure, sounds great. When do they want to meet? Marie took the phone. After talking for a while, she hung up. Mark says they'll pick us up at 6. Fits. I pretended to think for a minute. No, I think I need to be in my car in case things get worse at the plant, and I have to go there. Why don't we meet at the restaurant at 6? For some reason, Marie seemed disappointed by my proposal to change plans. To be honest, I didn't understand why, because Mark and Susie would have to come specially to pick us up. Oh wait, my inner voice told me, maybe they have some kind of evil plan, and cheating at mini golf is clearly not part of it. In the end, she agreed that my option was probably logical and called Mark to inform him of the changes. When she ended the call, she explained why she was disappointed. Mark said he had a new wine that everyone would like, and he wanted to do a tasting before we went. Now I'll have to try it another time. Alarm bells started ringing in my head. I wondered if he had mixed something into this wine. A chill ran down my back, and the hair on my arms and neck stood on end. Is this really my loving wife? Is she really consciously participating in a possible attempt to mix things up with me for the sake of their sexual pleasures? I left the room and called Max. I told him our intended route and asked him to organize observations. If I don't answer the phone or sound drunk or out of it, I will need immediate intervention. I doubted the bastard would dare spike my drink in public, but I wasn't going to risk it this close to finishing the plan. There was no time to download the recordings from the listening device in Marie's bag, so I had no idea if she was planning something with this nasty couple. All I had to do was remain vigilant for another week or so. I went back outside and finished the lawn and bushes around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Then he put away the lawn mower and trimmer, shook off all the grass clippings, and went into the house to shower and relax. Marie was not at home. She left a note on the kitchen island saying she needed to buy something, but she would be back in time. I didn't know what exactly she needed for a casual evening of burgers and miniature golf, but who was I to judge? In the afternoon, Max and Brock both got in touch. I took a shower and decided to take a short nap. Marie woke me up when she returned around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I got up and dressed in casual clothes. Marie came out of the bathroom with her makeup on and her hair up. It accentuated her slender neck, which I once adored. I used to love sneaking up behind her and kissing her tender neck when she was doing her hair. But now I couldn't help wondering if she was doing this today for Susie or for Mark. We left the house around 5:30 and got to the new burger bar exactly at 6. Mark and Susie arrived at about the same time, and we stood in line together. While we stood there, we chatted about trifles. Susie tried to get closer to me. I didn't know what she was trying to achieve, but I managed to keep my distance. Mark and Marie stood behind us, side by side. One time I looked back furtively and saw that they were holding hands. How I managed to hide my disgust and displeasure, I don't know. I kept reminding myself that soon it would all be over and they would receive a powerful message. Marie sat next to Mark, but directly opposite me, and Susie was next to me, opposite her husband. We ate huge, very juicy burgers. They were expensive, but incredibly tasty. We spent over an hour at dinner. This new bar only sold beer, no other alcohol. I abstained, but Mark and Susie drank. Marie doesn't really like beer, so she drank it slowly, stretching it out throughout the dinner. When they asked me why I didn't drink, I simply explained that I needed to keep a clear head in case I called from work. Mark didn't really press me to change my mind. Susie put her hand on my leg under the table. I let her do it until she went too far. Then I silently removed her hand without saying anything. Mark and Marie also had their hands under the table. I didn't try to find out if they were flirting with each other. After dinner, we went to mini golf. This was another new place, and it promised to be challenging. We had a good time. For a while, I was even able to forget how my wife cuckolded me with this couple. We laughed, egged each other on, and even made small bets on individual holes. Overall, it was a good evening. Max and Brock were checking in to see how I was doing. They didn't say if anyone they knew was there in person, but I assumed one of their friends was in the crowd. At the end of the evening, Mark suggested having a drink in a small bar between the golf club and our cars. I didn't see anything wrong with it, so Marie and I joined them. I ordered a bottle of beer and Marie chose a glass of wine. Mark took bourbon and Susie took some kind of fruit cocktail. I held my beer bottle in my hands while we talked. Sitting at the table, I removed the label from it. My bottle never once disappeared from my sight or from my hands. Mark looked unhappy several times. Once I even noticed how he gave Marie a sign with his eyes. After that, she tried to distract me with some comments or questions. I simply smiled, answering her, while not letting go of the beer. Finally, we were able to say goodbye without looking like early risers leaving too early. I said goodbye to the others with a smile on my face, and Marie and I headed home. As soon as we got into the car, Brock called me. "Hey boss, your shadow says your wife's lover just kicked his tire. He looks like he's really upset about something. Did you manage to keep the bastard at bay?" "Well, Brock, I'm glad to hear it. Keep up the good work and pass on my thanks to the entire team." He hung up with a chuckle. Marie, of course, asked if I had received good news from work. "Yes, Marie, it was a good call. Everything went exactly as we planned for the evening." She cast a suspicious glance at me in the darkness as we passed under a street lamp. I barely restrained myself from laughing and simply answered her with a satisfied smile. When we got home, Marie didn't seem to be in the mood for sex. I didn't push for more than a little goodnight kiss on the cheek and rolled over to go to sleep. I think I fell asleep with a big smile on my face. On Sunday, I got up early and took the recording device out of her purse to download the recordings again. I put the device on charge so it wouldn't be in her bag when she woke up. We had lunch quietly, hardly talking. I was no longer interested in her work affairs, and she clearly did not ask about mine. We sat in the living room. I was reading articles on the internet, and Marie was leafing through a magazine. Surprisingly, this time she did not try to involve me in another discussion. After a while, she began to get restless and announced that she was going for a walk along the nature trail. She didn't even ask if I wanted to go with her. With these words, she grabbed her bag and walked out of the house to the car. It seemed like it should have been a short walk to the nearest section of trail, but she had been gone for at least 4 hours. While she was away, I listened to several audio recordings. The long recordings mostly contained repetitions of their previous conversations. From them, it became clear that Mark was dominant in their relationship, and Susie was prone to expressing special preferences in communication. After each conversation, Mark again raised the question of when I would be, as he put it, taken out of the game. Marie tried to object, suggesting that I might be starting to suspect something, but Mark insisted on speeding up their plans, insisting that they meet as early as the weekend. I sent the remaining recordings to the cloud and gave my lawyer the site name and password so he could listen to them at any time. I received the test results from the doctor, and they were clear, which was a big relief. I had my passport at hand and ready to use. I talked to my bosses this week. My immediate boss wasn't too happy about the short notice, but he understood what I was going through. The poor fellow himself found out several years ago that none of his children were his. His wife slept with half the male population of our city and had no intention of stopping. He also lost a lot in litigation to get rid of the traitor. I struggled for a long time with the idea of how and when to tell my children about my departure. I thought it wouldn't be a big blow for Jamie and Mick, but it was for Stacy. She had to stay here and live with her mother for at least another year before going to college. I had no doubt that my revenge on Marie and her lovers would cause serious consequences, and I did not know how to avoid pain for Stacy. She was already an adult, but still a child. Marie returned at the time I expected, but she was limping again. She cited poor movement while walking. I said something supportive, and she left to take a shower. I didn't pursue her. She chose this path herself, and now she will have to live with it. That evening, Marie prepared a delicious dinner, and the three of us sat down at the table. During dinner, she started talking about how Mark and Susie would like to get together for the weekend in a couple of weeks. We discussed logistics, where to go, and what route to take. Stacy said that one of her brothers, Mick or Jamie, would be home for spring break at that time, so she would have company and we wouldn't have to worry. She also wished us to have a good time, taking a break from everything. I couldn't help the frown on my face. I had no intention of participating in this gathering, but I tried, most likely unsuccessfully in Stacy's eyes, to pretend that I wanted to meet the cheaters. Marie didn't seem to notice my lack of enthusiasm, while Stacy sat and looked at me with bewilderment. I shook my head slightly and subtly put a finger to my lips to indicate that I didn't want to discuss my feelings right now. She nodded and turned her attention back to her mother, who continued to tell her how wonderful this little weekend would be. The next morning, I met up with Max and Brock again in a noisy warehouse. Max gave me and Brock a simple push-button telephone with two numbers each other. We agreed that all voice conversations would be conducted only through these phones, and no text messages or emails would be sent to each other unless they were related to work. We have concluded that the plan will be put into effect this Friday or Saturday evening. It will depend on whether Marie goes to the Billingses on one of these nights. I was planning a weekend trip to Mexico to check out the new plant. I was actually planning on finally moving to Mexico this weekend. Marie will think that I will return, but I had no such intention. Brock will join me once retribution is complete. Max will have to wait a month or so, but maybe he can let us know how well the plan worked. I arranged for the money to be delivered to Max and Brock. It was supposed to be money for all the players, but I didn't really care. I was going to disappear with the wind. The rest of the week was tense as I tried to pretend to be my soon-to-be ex-wife. It was very difficult for me to be around Stacy. I wanted her to escape Marie's clutches so badly, but I couldn't figure out how to give Stacy a clue without her attacking her mother and ruining my plan. I told Marie about my trip to scout plant locations in Mexico. I made it sound like my current company wanted to expand and just wanted me to find a better location for a new plant. I assured her that I had no plans to move or try to take the CEO position at the new plant. Thursday morning, I went to the bank and withdrew enough money to go to Mexico. I didn't want any paper trail for a while. I also took the money my accomplices needed to complete the plan. That evening, I asked Stacy if she would accompany me on a walk along the hiking trail. Normally, she would tell me that she would rather spend time with her friends, but this time she immediately hung up and joined me in my car, and we hit the road. As soon as we got into the car, she asked, "What's going on between you and Mom? You seem so cold to her lately, and she seems so distracted and not part of the family most of the time." I should have realized that my perceptive daughter would realize something was wrong. I asked her to wait until we got to the trailhead, and she reluctantly complied. It only took a couple of minutes before we got out of the car and started walking down the trail. Then I started talking to my almost adult daughter. "Stacy, for some reason your mother decided to have an affair. I won't go into great detail, but she has sex with her co-worker Mark and his wife Susie. A group wishing to denigrate me and making plans to humiliate me and perhaps even try to force me into their way of life. This I cannot accept." Of course, she immediately wanted to know if I was going to forgive her mother. After all, what child would want his parents to split up? I shook my head. After hearing about what they force your mother to participate in and how they want me to be their little toy, I just can't accept her behavior. I raised my hand. No, she doesn't yet know that I know anything about her relationships with her lovers. I have made a very serious attempt not to confront her yet. Someday we will sit down and discuss all this, but not now. I took a deep breath. I needed to talk to you to let you know that I love you and want the best for you. Unfortunately, this does not include me continuing to live with your mother in this house. I have made arrangements for you and your mother to continue living here so you can graduate with your friends. She started begging me not to leave her. I had to stop and hug her and hold her while she cried. "SHHH baby, your sister and brother are everything to me. I would never leave you, but I can't stand what your mother is doing and planning. I have too much self-respect to allow such behavior." I tried to make her understand my point of view, but she ignored me. If she had come clean and recommitted herself to us and our marriage, I might have forgiven her, but she has shown no remorse at all. The only thing I heard on the tapes was that she was trying to force me to have sex with them. She showed no remorse at all. She even attacked me for working late when she stayed at their apartment many nights a week, without even bothering to call me and tell me she would be late. Stacy shook her head. She couldn't believe her mother did this. "I'm moving to Mexico. I want you all to visit me sometime, but I don't expect anyone to follow me there. Before I leave, I will give a message to your mother about my plans and how we are going to decide not to proceed further. I want to leave tomorrow when your mother goes to work and you go to school." She continued to cry and shake her head. We continued to walk, talk, and sympathize until we were both hoarse. I had to promise that she would call me anytime, and we had already started planning for her and her siblings to come visit over the holidays. I also promised to learn the local holiday customs so that it would be a rewarding experience at the same time. Stacy had her own car, but I purposely bought old jalopies for my young drivers so her car wouldn't be cherry. Since I wasn't going to do anything to my car, and it was a nice car, she was going to drive it as long as her mother would let her. I made it very clear that Marie was still her mother, and she needed to respect her as her mother, if not as my wife. We also promised to email and call each other regularly. I will miss my baby and her brother and sister. I also had to promise to return for important events in their lives. I promised to be her prom escort and then attend her graduation. Jamie was supposed to graduate from college at the same time, so I planned to be there for her as well. When we returned to the car, I asked her to drive. When we got home, I begged her not to tell her mother anything I said for the rest of the weekend. She reluctantly agreed. We got out of the car, and she ran to her room, slamming the door. Marie gave me a questioning look. I shrugged my shoulders and said, "Young people, it's impossible to live with them, but you can't live without them." I refused to explain anything, and Marie did not insist. That night, she hinted at intimacy as a way to recharge before I left, but I turned her down again. I said that I was so focused on the things at hand that I just couldn't think about sex with her. I definitely didn't lie. I left her alone and went to get ready for the trip. I took clothes for all occasions because I didn't know what awaited me. I knew that the plant building was ready and the last batch of equipment was being installed, but I had no idea whether I needed to arrive in a suit or whether business casual would suffice. Therefore, I took both options. This, at least, was a ready answer if Marie asked. She didn't ask. I went to bed and fell asleep before she came to bed. Whether she tried to wake me up or initiate intimacy, I don't know. I don't remember anything. The next day I got up, finished my morning routine, and packed my toothbrush and razor. Then I went downstairs with my luggage and waited for the shuttle to the airport. Considering the amount of luggage I had, I decided that taxis or Uber wouldn't appreciate me cramming all my stuff into the car. I didn't wake Marie up, but I knocked on Stacy's door. She was already up and ready to say goodbye. She begged me for the last time to forgive Marie and return home as soon as possible. I said nothing was impossible, but she shouldn't get her hopes up too much. We said goodbye when I noticed that the shuttle was already waiting. The trip went without incident. I heard the news from Max first. He took the day off work and coordinated the removal of everything I wanted to take from the house while Marie and Stacy were away. Everything was transported to the warehouse. I assumed that if Marie returned home after work rather than immediately going to the Billings apartment, she would realize that something serious had happened and call her friends to share her grief. If she immediately goes to them, she will find out about my disappearance after her entertainment, and it will no longer matter. Stacy reluctantly agreed to spend the weekend away from home. Marie believed she went to Six Flags with friends under adult supervision. In fact, Stacy went to a friend who had experienced a similar family breakup and could support her. I was settling into the hotel when the first message arrived. Max called and simply said, "It started." Then he hung up. I later learned that Marie went straight to Mark and Susie's after work. She had a travel bag, so she was most likely planning a busy weekend while I was gone. I didn't receive any more news for almost the entire evening. If everything went according to plan, I wouldn't need to contact anyone. I just sat and waited. The next morning, I visited the new plant for the first time. They assigned a translator to me. Carmen was very smart and attractive. I immediately felt trust in her. She did an excellent job of translating both my questions and the explanations of my colleagues. I immediately decided that I would hire her to teach Spanish and the local dialect so that I would not have to rely on a translator. We thoroughly inspected the building and equipment. I made some suggestions on how to improve performance, and we went into a conference room to discuss the implications of these changes. Everything went well. During the discussion, I received a text message from Brock, "On the way." I put the phone away and continued the conversation. We finished the day, and I was fully prepared to return to the plant on Monday. Local colleagues seemed surprised that I was going to be so involved in the work. I assured them that I would be the person they needed and would do everything to make the plant successful. Brock arrived after dinner and went straight to my room. He had a disposable laptop with several files, mostly photos, but also videos. I concentrated on the photographs. "Boss, everything went like clockwork. We have determined which wine this idiot prefers. They didn't even have time to have sex. The idiot wanted to make a toast. If you watch the first video, you will see everything for yourself." He turned on the recording. "Over the weekend, and for next weekend, when Troy will submit to me." He turned to Marie. "And for my woman of easy virtue, who wants to serve me." He turned to Susie. "To my wife, who loves my style of sex and does everything to make my fantasies come true." He then drank the wine, and Marie and Susie did the same. Brock paused the video. "We installed cameras everywhere in their apartment. Damn, I'm surprised they didn't notice one. Stupid bastards." He started another video. Mark's speech had already become slurred, but the women did not seem to notice. Mark became so sleepy that he simply passed out. Susie soon followed. Marie looked confused, but then drank the rest of the wine from her glass. At that moment, two people wearing black clothes with hoods entered the apartment. Marie didn't look surprised or alarmed by the appearance of the two strangers. Apparently, the effect of the substance intensified. One of the men told her to drink more wine. Marie nodded and drank another glass. After that, she also fell asleep. One of the men showed a like towards the camera. Brock stopped the video, and I started looking through the photos. I assigned a person to each of them while we were there. All were former military medics with extensive experience in black operations to extract information. They each wore a pulse oximeter to monitor the oxygen in their blood. There were no medical complications. All three are probably awake and angry as hell. Max checks the cameras to see how they're doing. "Are you sure this is enough?" I asked, watching Julio finish his work. His face remained impassive, but confidence was evident in every movement. "Of course," he answered calmly, putting away his tools. "Every piercing, every tattoo will remind them of who they really are. You wanted them to remember this for the rest of their lives, didn't you?" I nodded, looking at the result. There were now marks on their bodies that could not be ignored. Simple words, humiliating to the very core. They cannot be hidden, and they cannot be eliminated without pain and expense. "And the chains?" I asked, pointing to the heavy connections that extended from the piercing. Julio grinned for the first time ever. "This is not just decoration. Every step, every movement will remind them of what happened. This is their new order." I looked at the bunch of keys in my hand, feeling its weight. Julio wasn't kidding when he talked about titanium. You can't open these locks just like that, and the chains will withstand anything. "They deserve it," I said, more to myself than to him. Julio just nodded. "What's next?" he asked. At that moment, The burner phone notified me of a new message. There was an investment in it. I assumed it was from Max. When we opened it, we saw Marie leaving the Billings house, hunched over. When she saw her reflection in the car mirror, she burst into tears. The video has ended. In the message to the video, there was a short note. There is more, I'll bring it. Brock took the laptop and took it to his room. He said that he would take it apart and scatter it in different places. He then posted a video of Mark's toast and sent an anonymous email to the school system's general email address asking to see the link. We didn't really expect that anyone would notice this, since the letter would most likely end up in spam, but we hoped that it would help humiliate the cheaters. That night, I slept peacefully. Sunday passed quietly. I hired an English-speaking driver to give Brock and I a tour of the area. It was quite educational. The poverty level in the area was very high. During the entire trip, I did not see a single elementary school. When I asked the driver about this, he shrugged and said that only the rich could afford training. I made a mental note to ask my boss if it was possible to open a school for the employees' children. We had a quiet dinner, and I called Jamie to talk about Marie. She was shocked and very upset when I explained why I was leaving her mother. She promised to visit Marie as soon as we finished talking. I told her that Marie would receive her divorce papers the next day. I waited to figure out whether to take them to school or home. The next call was to my son. Mick is a wonderful person and will make a great man. He is our pride. Mick took the news calmly, but, like his sisters, hoped that we could leave everything in the past. As I told Stacy, it's not impossible, but you shouldn't count on it. Like my sisters, I promised to provide for him and arrange for him to visit me and return for important events. After talking with Mick, I was mentally exhausted. I hated the fact that Marie's stupidity had brought us to this point in our lives. She should explain why our marriage failed, not me. I preempted her explanation only out of respect for my children. I wouldn't let them believe that I abandoned them. Then Stacy called me. Returning home, she found Marie hiding in the bedroom with the lights off. She had to try to get Marie to let her turn on at least one bedside lamp. Stacy was shocked when she saw her mother. "Dad, do you have anything to do with this? She looks terrible. She says she was attacked while out with friends, but she won't let me call the police." I had to lie to my daughter. "What happened to your mother?" "I just made arrangements to have my things removed from the house. I arrived at the plant on Friday afternoon as planned and took a tour yesterday. Today, I took a tour of the area in preparation for a full day of work tomorrow." "Dad, this is so sad. She says that someone drugged her, pierced her nose and other places, and gave her tattoos on her arms and legs. Dad, she has a huge red A on her face." She paused for a moment before continuing. "Are you sure you have nothing to do with this?" I lied to her again. It was actually only a partial lie, as I wanted the crooks to get hurt, but allowed Max and Brock to plan what happened. I wasn't against it because there would be no permanent harm to either of them. They will be humiliated and ridiculed. If I had the opportunity to do this myself, everything would turn out much worse. I told Stacy this, and then told her that if I had done any of the things I wanted to do, I would be in jail right now. I don't think my daughter believed I would be so vindictive. I had to explain. Mark planned to drug me with something and use me, and then he intended to humiliate me to keep me in line. If you know me, you must understand that I didn't want to be involved in this. I'm a man. But Mom couldn't want to do this to you. She didn't do it, but she didn't really fight to stop it. She also did not refuse to see them again. By the way, ask her if she was with Mark and Susie when the attack happened. Did this happen last night or Friday evening? And ask why she doesn't want the cops to get involved. There must be more to this story than she told you. I can't imagine how someone could do what you described on the street. Stacy hung up and didn't call back for about an hour. When she called back, she was a little apologetic. I got more information from her dad. I think it happened on Friday night, not last night, as she said. Finally, she also admitted that she was with Mark and Susie and was in their apartment when it happened. She says she didn't do anything wrong, She was just visiting when the attack happened. I couldn't resist. Is she sure it wasn't Mark or Susie who did this to her? The audio files I have leave me in no doubt that Mark is a very nasty person. Before Stacy could hang up the phone and talk to her mother again, I begged her to call the police and open a formal investigation. I know she may think I had something to do with this, but I believe she needs professional investigators looking into this attack. Hell, she could have been used sexually too. Stacy was silent for a minute. I really didn't want to put this on her, but someone had to do something. I gave her a way out. Listen, I'll call Jamie. She's not far away and can come home to help your mother. Jamie doesn't know, but you know I won't come home tomorrow, and she'll be served with divorce papers. She will need your support. I texted Jamie while I was talking to Stacy. Come home as soon as possible. Mom was attacked and she needs you. I sent a copy to Mick, but he was further away and it would take him longer to get there. Stacy was still afraid to call the police, so I told her not to worry about it. When she hung up to talk to Marie again, I found the police emergency number at home, called it, and reported the attack. They promised to send an officer immediately. Almost 2 hours passed when Stacy called me again. I would be surprised if my loving wife called me because she should have understood why they were all attacked. The police also know that I had something to do with this, but it will be impossible to prove it. She told me that a couple of police officers came and questioned Marie and then left to question Mark and Susie. Marie finally admitted to having an affair with the couple. Stacy said that Marie began to cry and that Stacy joined her when Marie finally publicly admitted her wrongdoings. After her confession, the police showed little sympathy. Jamie arrived soon after and Marie was forced to confess again. My daughters made me proud and did not immediately judge her, but supported her in her pain. Marie finally told them that I must have known about what she was doing to the Billingses and that she knew I wasn't going to forgive her. Since both girls knew what awaited them, they did not argue with her. The police wanted Mary to come to the station so they could fully document her piercings and tattoos, but Mary refused. My daughters still did not know the extent to which Mary's appearance had changed. After Mick arrived, she managed to persuade Mary to get some rest. Jamie and Stacy were shocked to see how much Mary's body had changed as they helped her take a long bath before she went to bed. I received a wake-up call from Jamie who detailed how many piercings Mary has. It turns out that even the locks were still in place. I thought Mr. Mark would help her free herself so she could have sex again. These locks were not particularly strong and would not require much effort to remove. It occurred to me that perhaps Mr. Mark and Mrs. Susie had learned a very bitter lesson. But to be honest, I didn't care. I was more interested in their continued humiliation. Finally, I felt at peace and was able to sleep. The next morning, I had a hearty breakfast, and then Brock and I joined Carmen at the plant and started working. I didn't pay attention to the phone until mid-morning when we took a break. I had several messages from children. Mary was served with a summons, and she broke down again. I was still surprised that Mary didn't try to contact me to ask for forgiveness. I expected to hear the old tired excuses like, "It was just sex and it didn't hurt you." I thought she'd say something like, "You just don't excite me anymore," or "I need to experience everything before I get old and lose my looks," or even, "You were my first and I wanted to know how it's with others." I was absolutely sure that she believed that she still loved me. But I haven't heard anything from this woman of easy virtue, at least so far. My answers to the children were reserved. I told them that although I still loved their mother to some extent, I no longer respected or trusted her. She didn't try to work on our differences or problems in our marriage, but instead found new lovers, leaving me behind. I was given no say in her decisions. It was as if I didn't matter at all. When we took a break for lunch, new messages appeared. The children finally got Mary into the car and took her to the clinic. The locks were removed, but the other rings and chains remained in place. She developed mild inflammation in the areas of some of her tattoos and was prescribed bed rest. The doctor also ordered a complete blood test to make sure she didn't have any dangerous diseases. Mary seemed to break down again when she was told that the blood tests were being done mainly because of her lifestyle. I know that Mary always considered herself a decent and moral person. It was humiliating for her to be accused in the face of the immorality of her choice. Naturally, Mary took sick leave that day. I wondered how she could even continue working with tattoos on her arms. She might plead a skin condition and wear gloves, but she'll still have to wait until the henna wears off completely. My research has shown that this may take a couple of weeks. Max called to say that neither Mark nor Susie had been seen outside their apartment since Friday night, but the cameras were still rolling and they appeared to be physically okay. Well, maybe not completely fine, but at least they can move around and take care of their basic needs. Surprisingly, the local cops never contacted me. Either they believed Mary and Stacy that I was abroad, or they simply didn't care about the investigation. Finally, on Tuesday, I received a call from Mary. She was hesitant when I answered. "Troy, honey, when are you coming home? I thought you were only gone for the weekend. We need to sit down and talk about what happened." Mary, I was thoroughly enjoying our married life until these last few months turned everything upside down. Your relationship with that rat, Mark, and his wife ruined everything we had. I couldn't believe that you would cheat on me. Then I couldn't believe you would humiliate yourself with Susie and Mark the way you did. The absolute final nail in the lid of our marriage was hearing you plan to force me into your dirty life through coercion and illegal substances. She burst into tears, realizing that I knew more than I let on before leaving. I continued. "I tried to compete, but he had already completely subdued you. I learned from the recording that you gave him something special that belonged to me before allowing me to believe that I was the first to do it. It makes me wonder if I was even the first to experience any of your innocence." She kept repeating, "No, no, no, that's not true. You were first. I saved myself for you. I always loved and wanted only you." I couldn't help but call it a complete lie. "I'm sorry, but it was very obvious that you wanted Mark. He's young, handsome, and has a wife pretty enough to kill two birds with one stone. By the way, where were they at that time? Was it Mark who did this to you so that I would absolutely know who your master is? Is that why you didn't want to go to the police so he wouldn't get into trouble?" She again began to repeat in refusal. "No, no, no, he didn't do that to me. He and Susie were attacked at the same time. We woke up Saturday morning barely able to move. I have tattoos, Troy, on my arms that say all sorts of nasty things. How will I ever be able to be around my children again? I have a big red A painted on my face. I can't even look at myself in the mirror. How could you do this to me?" How come I did something to you? I was here in Mexico. I couldn't do anything. And I'll tell you what I told Stacy. If I had been there, I would have made sure you never enjoyed sex again. I think you should take another look in the mirror and see who is really to blame for all this crap. If you hadn't decided to sleep with the idiot and his wife, this would never have happened to you. Moreover, if you had stayed home at least one night this weekend, perhaps this would not have happened either. I was furious and could no longer continue the conversation. You know, sometimes I miss the old desk phones. Yes, they don't do all the cool things that a smartphone can do, but it's nice to slam the phone down to the base when you're pissed. I barely pressed the end call button before I threw the phone at the wall. I was surprised that he survived the blow. I didn't sleep well that night and was a little irritable the next day. By lunchtime, I calmed down, and we continued preparing the plant for opening. There were no more messages that day, not even from children. I finished early in the evening and slept well. On Thursday, I received a message from my lawyer at home. Mary found herself a lawyer and wanted to get something before she signed the divorce papers. Her first request was marriage counseling. Her counterclaim included all of our marital assets, since she no longer had a job and needed alimony and liquid assets. I called the lawyer and we discussed the situation for a long time. I asked him to play some of the latest audio files. They contained conversations between Mark and Mary about how they planned to force me to participate in their sex games the following weekend and what role I was supposed to play in it. I was confident that Mary's lawyer would reconsider the consultation after this. I also wanted to know why she no longer has a job. If she quit, then she doesn't need alimony. If she was fired, then it was her fault, and I saw no reason to sponsor her immoral lifestyle. I also told him that I was currently living and working abroad and could not just fly home to participate in consultations. I wasn't even going to show up at the hearing unless it was absolutely necessary. He promised to look into it and let me know the results. I had a new email address that only a few people knew, including Max. That evening, I received a video from him. It was actually a little sad. The video showed a very depressed Mary leaving school with a box of her belongings. It was pretty clear that she was crying as she tried to load the large box into the car. Mark was also carrying a box and tried to help her, but she hit him in the face and screamed at him to leave her alone and never talk to her again. Well, I guess her sex life has dwindled a little. I got the impression that losing her job was not her decision. By the way, she looked terrible in the video. Her hair was dirty and tangled, like an unkempt blonde. The face was blotchy and looked ugly. She had makeup on top of the A that looked strangely different from the rest of her face. She truly looked years older than her 40 years. Again, I ate well and slept well. In the morning, when I shaved, I noticed that the haggard and sad look had disappeared. My complexion improved, and I looked the same again as I did before all this crap started affecting my life. I also felt more energetic because I was no longer the victim of cheating. No more horns grew on my head. The day at the factory was productive. We have begun hiring interviews for leadership positions. Here Brock was indispensable. Like the old plant, we considered everyone regardless of their background. Carmen turned out to be insightful and smart. She also helped separate the wheat from the chaff. In any society, there are those who want to receive a salary without making any effort. Some of them are good at talking about themselves in order to get a job, and then explain the reasons why they lost previous jobs. The plant was scheduled to begin operating on a limited basis in a couple of weeks. We planned to launch only a few machines to produce small parts that are necessary for assembling large products. We needed inventory to stay ahead of demand once the entire plant was running at full capacity. This also gave us time to ensure that each production machine was operating optimally before running the entire process. It also allowed us to train every employee. Another group of workers came from Atlanta to help, but Brock and I remained the leaders in the process, and the others looked to us as leaders. Now you may be asking if I'm going to court Carmen. She has a wonderful smile that literally lights up the room, but I have to be honest. She is 60 years old, a former Spanish and English teacher, has a good husband, 3 children and 5 grandchildren and counting. So get those lustful thoughts out of your head. Yes, there are a lot of pretty women who want to get a job in a factory, but right now I just don't have time for any kind of relationship. Maybe in a year or so, but not now. Besides, I have no intention of entering into a relationship with a coworker. It may be a different country with different laws, but it doesn't take much effort to turn employees against you, so dating a female employee is completely out of the question for me. I received a response from my lawyer. Mary and Mark were fired based on a video that was posted online. I wonder where it came from. He told Mary's lawyer that her demands to get all the assets could go wrong. I may still have to pay separate maintenance, that is alimony, but we had enough evidence to get them prosecuted if she continued to make outrageous demands. Mick was the first one to come over for the weekend. He had a short break from his studies and decided to visit his old dad. We had a great time before he had to move back. A month later, Jamie came to see me, almost without warning. We had a great time again. I showed her around the plant, and she was able to practice her Spanish by flirting with some of the employees. We both knew that she was just joking, since she had a serious young man at home. She stayed for a little less than a week and then flew back. Stacy and I talked almost every night. I didn't do what some distant husbands do, forbidding her to talk about Mary. Stacy was dealing with a problem with her mother and needed some advice and a way to talk it out. It seems I was right in my guess that Susie used to be an exotic dancer, since she returned to her old profession after Mark's career collapsed. Now Mary danced too, but was not very successful. 40-year-old dancers don't seem to draw crowds. She had a terrible midday shift when there were almost no customers, only early drunks looking at her with dull eyes. It seemed like Mary usually got very drunk. For good old time's sake, I hoped she would pull herself together. Mary's parents contacted me. Her mom just wanted to know if there was a chance for reconciliation. Her father, as always, blamed me for every trouble under the sun, moon, and stars. His princess would never have cheated on me if I hadn't pushed her to it. Our conversation was very short. And yes, of course, I received calls from Mary from time to time. Sometimes she got angry and demanded that I come home, and sometimes she was so whiny that I could hardly understand her. I realized that sometimes she wanted my forgiveness. At other times, she believed that her body belonged only to her, and I had no right to tell her how to use it. She didn't like it when I agreed with this, and said that this was why I didn't want to have any more physical contact with her. She could sleep with anyone, and I controlled my body and decided with whom to share it. She didn't like it even more when I said that I didn't want to receive the gift that keeps on giving, because that's exactly what her ideas of free love were leading to. After the end of the school year, Stacy came to me for a hot summer. Fortunately, we had good air conditioning in the apartment and at the factory. She helped me organize my office and keep my papers in order. Carmen was now my personal assistant. I told you she is very smart. Hell, she could run the plant for me if she had to. Max finally joined us and took his seat. It took a little time for him to gain the respect of the employees that Brock already had, but he was a good leader, just in a new environment. Soon his team was operating at peak efficiency. My divorce moved slowly through the system. Mary tried to show that I abandoned her, but my lawyer made sure that he was present at every meeting. He also held a private meeting with her lawyer and the judge, where he showed some audio files as well as some video of the night the retaliation was carried out. After this, the judge had little to no sympathy for Mary and told her to stop doing nonsense. Finally, in the fall, I was free. It cost a lot, but I didn't care. I was paid well, and I lived the life I wanted. I didn't need a huge house, lots of expensive toys, or big parties, so my bank account grew even without my old investments. Mary got the house so that Stacy would have a place to live. I didn't even insist on selling the house when Stacy left for college. Mary could live there as long as she wanted. However, Jamie and Mick told her they would only come home for the occasional weekend, so they didn't care where she lived. Stacy convinced her mother to sell her old junk, and now she was driving my car. I had a new car here in Mexico. I even thought about buying a local Volkswagen Beetle, but ended up choosing an SUV since the roads here weren't in the best condition yet. We were just laying a road from the plant to the nearest large highway so that trucks could freely enter and exit. I returned to Stacy's prom and fulfilled my promise to be an escort. I don't know if this made her happy or not, because she didn't dance dirty like her classmates since I was looking after her. I was glad to see Mary there in a similar role, but I didn't talk to her. I stayed on the opposite side of the hall the entire time. Every time she tried to get around the dancers, I also moved in the opposite direction, without losing sight of the children. The next morning, I flew back to the plant and didn't return until Jamie's graduation, where she graduated with honors. Since Stacy's graduation was just a few weeks away, I decided to stay until then. I took a seat on the opposite side of the large hall from Mary and her parents. Mick and Stacy joined me midway through the ceremony, and we held hands, screaming and cheering as Jamie crossed the stage to receive her diploma. There were tears of joy on my cheeks. I couldn't avoid meeting Mary completely. After Jamie's graduation ceremony, there was a small celebration. Mary's father refused to shake my hand, and instead made several comments about my background. He seemed really angry when I just smiled and nodded in response. Mother Mary hugged me and asked how I was doing. I was honest and said that I was busy creating a new life in another country. She just nodded. Mary looked a little better than the day she was fired. I haven't seen any videos or photos since then. At graduation, I kept such a distance that I couldn't see her clearly. Her hair was rapidly turning gray, losing its brilliant blonde, and she didn't even try to dye it. She used makeup on her arms to hide the tattoos, but it rubbed off unpleasantly. We barely spoke other than to say hello to each other. I noticed that she was watching me all the time. Since I didn't know if she had regular sexual relationships with men or women, I couldn't tell if she was just horny or really missed me. Of course, I missed what we had, but I knew it was in the past. It was a good time. I chatted with the relatives, but eventually we had to leave the place and go to a large buffet restaurant to continue the meeting. Finally, I returned to the hotel room I had rented for the night. Jamie and I then took a short road trip around the state. The state has a huge number of historical sites, museums, fairs, street dances, and other events, so our days were busy. At her graduation reception, Jamie announced that she had accepted her fiancé's proposal, but he was unable to join us because he had immediately started a new job in another state. Jamie planned to look for work there after her vacation and was preparing for a fall wedding. I promised to walk her down the aisle. We completed our mini-trip across the state just in time for Stacy's graduation. Mary invited me to stay at her house, but I refused and chose the most luxurious hotel in the city. It was expensive, but as part of the deal, I was able to host Stacy's reception at the same hotel. My company covered all the expenses as part of my annual bonus, but I didn't tell anyone about it. At the ceremony, I sat in the same row as Mary and her parents. Mick and Jamie sat next to me, and we screamed and cheered as Stacy walked across the stage to collect her diploma. Tears rolled down my cheeks again, partly from pride, partly from shame for not being there for her over the past year. The reception went well. Even Mary's father was not so open in his contempt for me. He just avoided me like the plague. Again, Mary kept looking at me. This time, the reception included catering, so everyone stayed for the evening. I forgot about the DJ, so we just turned on Pandora music and danced anyway. Jamie told me in private that we could do the same at her wedding. It was a great time, but all too quickly I had to go back to work. I promised Stacy that we would take our own road trip across the state before she left for college. The work was going well. The plant was faced with small problems every day that needed to be resolved. My Spanish improved, although I sometimes wondered if I really needed to know all the local swear words. As promised, I returned home and Stacy and I explored other parts of the state, learning about local history, customs, and events. We spent 2 days in a small ranch town where we went to the rodeo in the evenings and enjoyed the local fair during the day. This town of just a couple thousand people had 3 stages where various local and lesser-known artists performed all day long, all for free. We ate huge turkey legs, spiralized potato chips, BBQ pork, and Indian tacos while walking around and enjoying the atmosphere. I walked Stacy to college and then went back to work. Carmen, Brock, and Max did a great job while I was away. Sometimes I wondered if I was really that needed. I was 45. I looked at my life from the outside. I had 3 wonderful children. Soon another son will be added to them, a good young man. Otherwise, I had nothing to be proud of, a failed marriage and loneliness in the future. Sometimes I went on dates, and occasionally someone would stay the night, but nothing serious worked out. Carmen was still helping me sort and weed out potential life partners, and I was truly grateful for that, but it seemed that I was too difficult to satisfy. One day, Carmen asked me to interview a potential teacher for a small school. We were opening for the children of employees. I'd never done this before, but I didn't argue with Carmen. When I entered the conference room, I was surprised to see Mary there. I stopped and almost turned around to leave, but Carmen was right behind me and prevented me from doing so. When I silently asked her what the hell was going on, she simply motioned for me to come in. Mary wasn't looking at the door at the time, so she didn't see our exchange, but her face lit up when I walked around the table and sat down. I didn't say a word until I started studying her documents. She was completely honest in her application. She indicated that she does not have a teaching certificate, but has many years of experience as a teaching assistant and has knowledge of subjects at the elementary school level. She also did not speak Spanish, but was willing to work with other teachers to develop her language skills. When I finally looked up, I saw hope in her gaze. "Mrs. Stutzman, you are not qualified to teach here. Tell me, why should I hire you?" She didn't blink an eye. "I have many years of experience as a teacher's assistant in public schools in the United States. I understand this is not a licensed school, but you are creating a place where passionate educators are needed to make a difference and make a difference in the community. Your philosophy is to give more than just work, and I completely agree with that. The entire community will develop and expand because of your vision, and I want to be a part of that process. I know that I have failed to cope with my obligations before, but I learned from my own bitter experience why a person should always fulfill them. I'm ready to sign any contract you offer me for any salary you set. Just give me the opportunity to move here and contribute." She reached out her hands and took mine. "I know, Troy, that I will never receive your forgiveness for what I did," she said, looking at her tattoos. Now the letters on her hands were painted over, turning into shapeless spots. She explained, "I changed them, but I still see these words very clearly." She fell silent, then continued, "I will always be honest about what I did to deserve my punishment. If at least one person learns a lesson from my example, I will be happy." She leaned closer so that Carmen couldn't hear her. "I still have all the piercings and chains." Then she leaned back. "Please let me redeem myself, just a little. Let me teach children again. In America, I have no future in this direction." "Do you still drink or use it?" I asked. That was the only question I asked at that moment. She shook her head. "No, I've been holding on for 5 months. I also quit dancing and got a job in a small store. It didn't pay well, but my ex-husband provided most of my living expenses." She fell silent for a moment, looked at Carmen, and I caught a hint of collusion between them. Then Mary turned to me again. "I also did not have any carnal relations for almost a year. I have a health certificate in this package. Although I understand that this will not change anything in our personal relationship, I just want you to understand that I will not be a village woman of easy virtue and will not become a disgrace to you or the children I will teach." Since my personal assistant was clearly on her side, I knew I didn't have much of a choice. I looked at Carmen. "Do you have a place where she could live? She needs something safe and reliable when she's not at school. She will also need transportation." Carmen smiled her radiant smile. "She, Señor Patron. There is a newly completed apartment for her next to the factory. I also got her a bug to drive around with. I hope this is enough." Mary nodded. I sighed heavily as I stood up. "I know when I am overwhelmed, and it is time to make a dignified retreat. Have a nice day, ladies." I nodded to both of them and left the room. Now, I know some will say that I capitulated and accepted it again. No, sorry, but she completely destroyed this bridge. I had absolutely no intention of ever getting close to her again. She worked hard teaching the children. Now she was an employee and therefore out of reach of me. I know Brock sometimes joked about dating her. I think he was trying to piss me off, but I reminded him of the video and audio recordings of her sexual exploits and told him that he could take the risk if he was ready. He didn't bring it up again, and I didn't ask if he was dating her. Instead, I continued to go on occasional dates and let Carmen continue to match me with potential dates. Life goes on. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.